Back to the grill again, the grill again, back to the grill again, the grill again. Yo, Happy New Year. We back for season 2, episode 1. This is the 22nd episode, but we did have like a holiday episode in between season 1 and season 2. So you haven't checked that out, please do. So technically this is the 22nd episode, but the first episode of season 2. Word is born. I bring back what I'm reading. We have our usual how to approach women and health. I do a nice review of The Last Jedi. I don't do a review on She's Gotta Have It. I actually ask you to go with Tea with Q and J to do that. But ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Happy New Year. Yo, let's do this.
Uncharted land.
People get shook up, when I'm introduced as God.
You got that good hair, too.
You're the first one out there with a dashiki talking that crap.
It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
I pull up, hop out, air out, made it look sexy. They won't take me out my element. Nah, take me out my element.
This ep, I'm sipping on Mount Gay Barbadian rum. Rum from Barbados. Yeah, that place. I'm partial to Dominican and Puerto Rican rum, but the homie Brainy Brown girl, she bought it for me, and I'm not gonna lie, man. I've been making hot toddies out of it. I've been really loving it. I plan on doing some coquito with it, but shout out to her for that. But once again, this one is powered by Mount Gay Barbadian rum. No, they're not paying me for that. Word. I talk about this a lot online, and in people's faces too. I do this, what you hear on this podcast, I do at work, I do at home, I do out in the streets. But it's a new year, right? And there are people that are gonna make some goals. They're gonna set some goals that might be a little bit tricky, a little bit tough for them to do, but that's okay, right? The whole point is to become a better person, right? The whole point is to move forward, whether it deals with your health, finances, going back to school, whatever. And I really have a problem with people like talking about that, like saying, oh, I'm tired of all these people coming to the gym and taking up space. They're going to be gone by March, or you're not going to do nothing. There's no new you, et cetera, et cetera. Or why are you making these changes over the new year? Like, shut up, man. Let people, my thing is, for whatever reason, if somebody says to me, I want to do better in X, Y, Z, I encourage them. You know what I'm saying? Don't get me wrong. I can see if they say some wild stuff like, I'm going to go through like a diet where I don't eat, and I'm like, nah, I don't do it that way, and I try to help them out, but I don't discourage them, right? And I don't think you should either. I think you should be supportive. I think you should help people out. I think you should give them words of encouragement. If you have any ideas, or if you got money, hook them up. So I think we got to avoid being negative. I think one thing I've learned is that you have two kinds of peer pressure. You have bad peer pressure and you have good peer pressure, right? Bad peer pressure ain't no joke. And that's like kind of hard to beat. But good peer pressure is actually pretty dope. So I like the fact that, around December and then January, there are people who are deciding as a group to make certain changes. And there are strength in numbers, man. So, please be encouraging and stop hating. Nobody likes a hater. Also, I know I'm super duper late with this, but January 1st, I know I'm like 2 weeks after the fact, marks the Day of Haitian Independence. Shout out to all my Haitian massive out there. Sac passe. I know that doesn't get a lot of light in the media, but we try to make it a little celebration ourselves. I'm trying to find a nice soup jamu recipe out there for next year because I want to make soup jamu. But definitely, there's no way you can discuss the history of the United States, the history of black liberation, literally the history of the world, if it wasn't for the Haitians. Because remember, and this is a brief history lesson, the Haitians kicked Napoleon's ass so bad, he had to sell Louisiana to the United States for $18 million. He sold it to Thomas Jefferson. It's called the Louisiana Purchase. So the United States would not have expanded if it wasn't for the Haitian Revolution. On top of that, the Haitian also beat the Spanish and kicked them out of the Dominican Republic side. So they freed the Dominican Republic. So I wouldn't be here today. Me and my folks wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that, right? On top of that, that was like the first loss that Napoleon had, right? And it kind of set him back. So that kind of like changed world history in that aspect. On top of that, when it comes to black liberation, whites in the Americas are so afraid. They suppressed this information from people for several decades, right? Because remember, this happened in 1804. In the United States, they still had chattel slavery, as well as places like Brazil. So they kept all this information from the general populace because they were afraid that, Africans would revolt where they were from. So shout out to Haitians. And also, we got to recognize the plight that Haiti is in now. We have to support them as much as possible because there's reasons why they're in the situation they're now, and they're all sinister. Word.
Yes.
The name of the game is Light Works. Night of the Slips. The name of the game is Light Works.
As I record this, it is January 15th, and people are celebrating the birthday of Martin Luther King. And it's always a ill kind of year to see this, transpire. I usually, get involved with marches. There's just a big one here in Dayton that I usually go to. It's pretty dope. It's fun. I can see a lot of my students out in the streets. I can see a lot of people that I know, a lot of other activists that I mess with, a lot of artists. So it's really a family reunion. The reason why I'm not going today is because, number one, it's too damn cold and it's snowing. It's just coming down hard. But shout out to everybody that goes out there. It's really packed no matter the weather. I remember one time it was like 5 degrees. People were still out there. So, shout out to the people. Always power to the people. Anyway, let's get back to the discussion. Jared Ball wrote a nice piece on his website. And he has a site called I Play What I Like. He's a DJ. He's a professor as well. But he also has his own radio show, which is actually pretty dope if you haven't checked it out yet. He has a piece called Not Remembering Martin Luther King, something to that effect, right? The title is very striking, but he's spot on in the article. And in the article, he talks about how really the image that you see of Martin Luther King being put out there by politicians and corporations and some people that we know is actually a caricature of Martin Luther King, right? And it's funny because I remember recently when Nelson Mandela passed away, I was thinking to myself, man, they're making him sound like a self-help guru, right? Because they're always putting these quotes of him saying such empowering things, that people talk. They usually self-help gurus say, right? Kind of quotes that they say, and they kind of like do the same thing with Martin Luther King, right? They kind of like always. Take his image and then make him like the self-help guru, and all these corporations come out there and they push him, knowing damn well that Martin Luther King didn't fuck with the government and he did not fuck with corporations, right? He was actually towards the end of his life very anti-capitalist, right? And it's funny because J. Edgar Hoover was saying back in the early 60s, like, oh, he's a communist, which he was, not too far from it. He was kind of like a socialist, right? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't, socialism socialism is dope. I'm down with that, right? But it's just kind of crazy how the government, who spent all this money surveying him and harassing his peoples and letting the Klan fuck with him and everything, all of a sudden he's like their hero. It's kind of wild to see that. But Jared Ball talks about the sanitized version of MLK that we see every year. It's really not him, and he probably. If he was alive, and I try not to put words in their face, but I really don't think, same thing goes for Nelson Mandela. I really don't think they wanted us to build monuments to them and all that stuff. We really haven't, and when I mean we, I'm not saying everybody, because there's a lot of people, some of them that I know and love, who continue the work of Martin Luther King every day of their lives. You know what I mean? There are a lot of people who do the thankless job of that go out in the streets, right? But most of us don't continue that work. You know what I mean? Most of us aren't really putting in that work. At the same time, there are people that have not answered for the crimes that Martin Luther King has convicted others of, right? When he's going out there and talked about oppression, whether it's economic or social, there are people that have not answered those crimes. There are people that have not admitted to their complicity in that, right? So it's a shame, really. It really is a shame. But check out his article. You really dig it. And again, happy Martin Luther King Day. Like I said, there's some people out there continuing to work. And his vision is much bigger than that speech that he did in 1963. You know which speech that I'm talking about. It's way bigger than that. And if you think that that's what he's all about, then you might want to do some reading. Word. Yo, I think this is hilarious, man. But it's funny because, like, when I ask people about their opinion about the movie Bright, which is a Netflix-produced movie, they've spent like $90 million on it. It stars Will Smith and the other cat. I forget his name, but anyway, they spent $90 million on it, and they got like 18 million views over up at the weekend it was released back in December. And when I ask people, they either hate it or they loved it, right? There's nobody that's like in the middle. And I'm going to be honest with you. The people that usually love it are people whose reviews I do not trust, right? And the people that hate it are people who have reviews that I do trust. And let me just say this. Bright is basura. Basura is Spanish for trash. And you could probably hear me say that more often in 2018. Straight basura on so many levels. We're not even talking about the social justice issues that they try to address, right? Just cinematography wise, writing, acting, everything on every conceivable level, it was basura. It was straight basura. And I will fight anybody in the street over this opinion on so many levels. But it's just amazing because for Netflix, it's a win because 18 million viewers watched it. Now I didn't break the internet like Luke Cage did, right? Which they should really check that. But it explains why Hollywood and Netflix, because if you go on Netflix, and look, I love Netflix, yo. There's a lot of trash shit on Netflix that they produce. There's a lot of trash shit they have on there. Death Note is a good example of that. Straight basura, right? But they're going to continue to make these kinds of movies because they go by views and clicks, right? And streaming, right? That's what they go by, right? So, yeah, of course, all of us were it's kind of like the Transformers movies, right? If you watch the Transformers movies are trash. And the people that think that are dope are usually people whose reviews I don't trust, right? Usually, like, I don't even want to go there, right? But the thing is that everybody goes to see that expecting it to be dope, and then it's whack. So the numbers don't lie, right? So if they make 300 million opening weekend, of course they're going to come out with a sequel. Duh, right? Duh. So Netflix is like, okay, we got 18 million views. We're going to make more trash like this, more basura, right? But, yo, you cannot tell me that Bright isn't trash. Like, yo, and here's my thing. I'm going to end this right here, this segment right here, because I feel like I shouldn't waste any more time on how basura it was. But again, I put it out there. We can have a duel in the street. Swords, knives, sticks, hands, whatever. Word is born. Yo, y'all gonna have to bear with me as I hydrate over here with some of the waters. But check it, man. Stay hydrated, man. In 2018, stay hydrated, man. I know for a lot of us, it's all love, but there are people that don't drink water. Like, I know it blows my mind too. I'm like, damn, B, you don't drink water? Anyway, I might talk about that in the health section. Who knows? I want to talk to folks about like Amara La Negra. Let me just say this, Amara La Negra, right? Love her. Been loving her for a while. She was doing like some like reggaeton. She was doing like some really pop stuff in DR, Dominican Republic. And so I've been following her for a while. Love her. I think she's freaking gorgeous. She's beautiful. And it's funny. I like how on Hip Hop Miami, the situation came with some whack ass producer was like, oh, you want that black shit and all that. Pretty much, right? He was pretty much anti-black. And a lot of people were like really bugging, not on the dude that was anti-black, but mostly on her. And they were saying she's not black, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember somebody actually telling me online, what is Afro? Afro is not a race, Afro Latino, like, people bugging. Like, now, this is one thing I don't do, because I wrote a series of articles on what I self-ID as. I am Afro Latino. I self-ID as black. And the reason why I self-ID as black is because I was born in the United States. Whereas my folks were born in the Dominican Republic. So my experience was different than saying somebody who was who was born in Dominican Republic. It's different. I mean, don't get me wrong, you still have colorism, you still have white supremacy, you still get taught the same bullshit, but my experience was different. Thanks to the Nation of Gods and Herbs and those organizations like that. But I'm going to go into that some other time. But I used to really defend my position when somebody says some wild shit. I don't do that no more. And the reason why I don't do that no more, this might sound elitist to y'all, but most people, you know, even black people, most people, like, when it comes to like understanding race, right? When it comes to understanding racial history, when it comes to understanding slavery, is below elementary, right? And if you go to any textbook in the United States, any high school, any elementary, middle school, textbook when it comes to history, when they talk about slavery, it's actually really like maybe 1 or 2 pages. Then they get into like the Civil War, right? Go look it up. And they'll just discuss chattel slavery in the United States. And it's a very brief discussion, right? Some of them don't even talk about ODR, the one drop rule, right? Most of them don't even talk about how slaves were brought to all of the Americas, right? To South America, Central America, to the Caribbean, to Canada, to places like Britain, to places like France. Like, slaves were brought all over. Here's a good example. And this is stuff that you probably won't get until you go to college, right? If you go, and that's if you take Introduction to African American Studies. Like, you got to take that for you to get this kind of information. But like, for example, if you go to Iraq, there's a huge black population there. I know people are like, oh, you crazy. And it's kind of like the telenovelas, right? You ever watch telenovelas, right? Excuse me. Go watch the telenovelas. You watch telenovelas, it's all white Latinos. Right? But most of those countries have substantial, not just people of African descent, but also indigenous populations. But you don't see them on these telenovelas, right? And they're kind of like Spanish soap operas, Spanish-speaking soap operas, right? So it's kind of in Iraq, the same thing. People you see on the news, people that are in the media are usually Arab. Arab, because I know Iraqis are Arab, Iranians are Persian, right? Well, they're descendants of Persians, right? So you don't see that, but there's a big one. Why? Because hundreds of years ago, there was a big slave trade that went to Iraq. Because remember, Baghdad was like pretty much considered the central part of, science and art and, schooling and education in that part of the world. They was very rich. People had a lot of money. So they had a big slave trade that came from the eastern part of Africa. There was a giant revolution. It was called the Sanj Revolution, the Sanj Revolt, Zanj. And the Sanj were East Africans, and they literally marched from that part of East Africa all the way to the Arabian Peninsula onto Iraq. And they almost sacked Baghdad. Like, it was a big, it's funny because they never talk about it. And it's like a huge thing, that huge deal that happened. And it really knocked the Iraqis, or, back then, I think they were Babylonians. They knocked them out of the slave trade. Like, they said, we're not doing this no more. And so that's like that. And a lot of them stayed there. So why they never talk about it, I don't know. Why? White supremacy, right? But that's just an example. It's a small example, right? That people just don't talk about these things. So a lot of times I stay out of that debate because I kind of feel like people are just not educated enough. And it's not my job. It's really not my job. Now, I teach it in school. So I teach my students that. But I don't if you walk up to me, I'm not going to teach it. And don't get me wrong. I don't blame people for that. It's an education system that does that, white supremacy. I have to blame white supremacy for that. But I don't really talk about it because a lot of people are just not educated on it. And I simply just literally wasting my time. And look, you got people like the rapper B.O.B., right? This motherfucker's running around saying that the slave trade never happened because there's no slave ships. Like, really? Motherfucker, like, really? Like, I've been on the Amistad, bro. I've been on the Amistad. Some real geek stuff though, and I know it's kind of late because we're like halfway into January, but if you check my YouTube channel, if you go to YouTube and you put All Things Geekery Dan Terezomi, you'll find my top 5 comic books of 2017. Definitely check it out because I got some interesting picks in there. You're really going to dig number 1 as well. Well, you probably won't. You probably will dig actually number 5 and number 4, but you'll dig number 1. So check it out. And also on my YouTube channel, you can find some old episodes of my podcast. So check that out definitely. So All Things Geekery, or just put in where my Killa tape at. It'll bring up my YouTube channel, and you'll find all that stuff in there. I'll probably redo it here on my next episode. I don't know. I'm still debating about it. But we'll go from there. But anyway, just check it out. Word. Well, the first book of 2018 that I picked up was the Crunk Feminist Collection. And this is by Brittany C. Cooper, Susanna Morris, and Robin Boylorn. They have other people in here that contributed to this. And really is a collection of essays that they posted on their blog, the Crunk Feminists. If you're not up on them, I've been following them for a couple of years. I've been reading their blog sporadically, like not consistently. So this actually works out for me. It's really, really dope. They talk about feminism, of course. They talk about, rape, sexual harassment, representation, race, of course. I can go on and on. It's definitely well worth it. And I appreciate the fact I like compilations because I can go to, page 1 or page 78 or page 150, and I can read, according to what I want to check out that day. Or you can read it from the cover to cover. So it's really dope. I love it. If you're not following the Crunk Feminists, you need to. You'd be surprised how many of them you might already heard of or read stuff from or listened to the interviews. But definitely, that's what I'm reading for the month of January. That's the first book I got for 2018. Word. The people have spoken, and a lot of people have asked me to do a segment on atheism, and because a lot of people always have questions about it. Let me just say this: you will be surprised who's an atheism or agnostic in your circle. You will be very surprised. A lot of people, I know people that go to church and they're atheists. I know people who go to the mosque and they're atheists, and they just don't say nothing to anybody. They just keep it to themselves, and there's a reason for that. And part of it is social stigmas, right? And the other part is actually because for a lot of us, even myself, the first social networks that we actually became familiar with are religious institutions. And that's the number one reason why people go to their places of worship, because for them, it's a part of a social network. For a lot of us, it's a social network that goes back generations. So anyway, I'm jumping the gun. I might get a little bit too academic here, and let me know if I am. But before we go any further with this segment, and what I want y'all to do is, if you have any questions about atheism, please send them to my Twitter at DanTresomi, DanTresomi. And I'll try to answer them, or go to Omi's podcast at OMISPOD and you can ask me questions about atheism there. The first thing I should do is I should define it, right? And you probably won't find this in the dictionary. But atheism is just someone, an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural. And there's levels to it, yes, like anything else, because there are atheists who might not believe in like a higher power. And then again, I take that back. No, that will make them agnostic. They might not believe in a higher power, but they might believe in like angels and stuff like that. And agnostic is someone who's like on the fence. There's no evidence to prove to them that there is God. There's no evidence to prove to that person that there isn't a God. So they're stuck in the fence. So I was agnostic at one time. But an atheist is believing in the supernatural. So angels, demons, horoscopes, auras, all those things. We just don't, leprechauns, unicorns, none of that. We don't believe in any demons, devils, all that. Because a lot of people always ask me, well, if you don't believe in God, you probably worship the devil. And I'm like, no, we don't believe in that either. We don't eat babies. We come in all shapes, sizes, colors. We're all over the world. And yes, we've been a part of this world for millennia. Anytime you had people who believed in the supernatural, you had a small group of people who was like, that's all bullshit. But a lot of them stayed in the shadows because in some cultures, being an atheist, or actually being what's called there's something called apostasy, and that's when somebody rejects the religion of their birth, right? That meaning the religion that they were introduced to when they were babies, because we are all indoctrinated in our religions from when we were born. So apostasy in some places is punishable by death. So for a lot of people, just doing that was a bad idea. People would say, oh, the gods are going to bring bad fortune to us, so you must leave. So for a lot of people, they kept their mouth shut because the results would be very tragic and sometimes fatal if they came out and admitted they were atheists. So if you have any questions, please send them to me, and it'll be part of the regular segment on this show. Word! And now for Ancient Chronicles. So I just want to talk real quick about not any particular incident, but probably an incident that you have probably encountered. When we talk about rape culture, I know a lot of times when there's an allegation made, one of the arguments that rape apologists, and yes, if you defend rape, you are a rape apologist. Not all men are rapists, but many are rape apologists, right? I used to be a big one too. Anyway, when having a debate with someone will say, the argument, you weren't there, so how do you know? And from the first observation, you might say, you know what? You make a good point. Unfortunately, that's a double negative. And here's why it's a double negative, right? Not double negative in the grammatic sense, right? But here's why it's an argument that cancels itself out. That's why I call it a double negative, right? Because what you're saying is you really can't speak on a matter, right? Because you wasn't there. Good point. But the thing is, you weren't there either. So why are you using that argument to defend rape or allegations of rape, right? And I just see that happen a lot with rape apologists. It's probably the third thing they go to. They go, because the first one is she's trying to get money, right? The second one is usually, she asked for it, meaning, she showed up. And, she showed up, maybe she was wearing a mini skirt or whatever, or she came to his hotel room late at night, et cetera, et cetera. But the third one is you weren't there, so how do you know, right? And here's the funny part. That argument, I've seen it used in remember George Zimmerman, right? Like the George Zimmerman case. Like really, the messed up thing about that case is that the only other witness to what actually happened, Trayvon Martin is dead. So the argument that anybody could have in that case is you wasn't there, so you don't know. And that's probably why he won, on top of, Trayvon Martin being black, and they're painting him as like a thug. But, if we were to take away all that, the jury probably would have said that, right? And I've probably seen it in other cases as well. But most of the time, in most crimes, nobody ever says you wasn't there, right? Nobody ever says that. It's only when it comes to rape that people always got to bring that one up. Any other crime, murder, they'll be like, oh, okay, either he did it or he didn't do it. I think he did it, right? But no one is ever like, oh, you wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? So I just find that to be funny and, ironic. And that ends our Chronicles of Men Ain't Shit. I wanted to do a review of Spike Lee's Netflix series, She's Gotta Have It, which is a kind of like based off the movie he did back in the 80s, his first movie, if I'm not mistaken. And I didn't like it. And look, I'm a huge Spike Lee fan, but I was not feeling it. But I'm not going to do a review on it. And the reason why I'm not going to be doing a review on it is because this is kind of tough. But anyway, it's something that was supposed to be written for women, about women. And I'm not saying that nobody else could watch it, right? It's supposed to be the perspective of Nola Gay. And it's supposed to be about a black woman who's polyamorous, pansexual, and all that. And let me just say that it's not. It's particularly not. And for some reason, I know they said that there was women writers on it and co-writers and all that. And it didn't feel like it. It felt like it was really written for the male gaze. And I didn't like it for several reasons. But there's a lot of, not just outside of it wasn't really about a polyamorous woman who's pansexual. It really wasn't. And I didn't like the casting. The only person I really liked was Anthony Ramos as Mars. It's the only really thing I liked. Everything else I kind of like was like, and I like the person who played Shameka. I really liked her. But everything else I kind of felt like, it seemed like Spike wrote this back in the 90s. And then like when they was like, oh, we're going to give you a Netflix series, he took it off the shelf and blew the dust off, and he didn't like update it. Because it feels like it was written in the 90s. I don't know. Also, the characters in it feel like, outside of, Anthony Ramos as Mars, outside of him, nobody really felt like they was New York. So anyway, I highly recommend that you go to Tea with Q and J, their podcast. And they did 5 episodes of their podcast where they reviewed 2 episodes because it was like a 10-episode Netflix show. I recommend you going to them and listening to their review because I think they did a good job of not only reviewing it, but deconstructing a lot of the crap that was in it. So I highly recommend that you go to them to watch it, to listen to the review and check it out. I recommend that you watch it, even though, again, I didn't like it. I think I give it like 1.5 out of 5 stars. Because there was some elements that I liked, but I wasn't, but go to Tea with Q and J. They did a great job. I actually enjoyed it more than the show, than the actual TV show, the Netflix show. So I recommend you go to them. I'm going to put that in the show notes so you can definitely check it out. The sisters over there are awesome. Shout out to Queen and shout out to Jay. I love y'all. Y'all always shout me out. So please go to them and listen to their review. Actually, subscribe to their show because their show is like really dope. All right, man. Okay, so for this health segment, I'm going to go over some things I already repeated last season, but I think they're important to emphasize. But anyway, this segment is about how to make it past March. What happens is during the New Year's, we all make these resolutions to be, we set goals to hit it by the end of the year. And by the time March, April rolls around, we kind of fall off. Some people fall off sooner than that, but there's several reasons why, but here's some things to make you go past March, right? Because if you can make it past March, you can make it all the way to the end until 2019, right? So here we go. Number 1, don't let anyone or anything discourage you. I know that there's a lot of people, particularly online, that'll say, oh, new year, new me, shut up. Like those people, cut them out of your life, right? Cut anybody out of your life that discourages you. So if you're like, hey, I want to do X, Y, Z, and somebody's like, you ain't going to make it. Cut that person out of your life, because one thing I've learned throughout life is that we tend to listen more to the detractors than we do to the people that support us. It's just like a human thing, right? Where we have these self-doubts, and a lot of times it'll take one person to move us into that realm of self-doubt, and then we give up. So don't let anyone do that, and also don't let anything discourage you, because I know a lot of times things will happen, like we have to work extra hours. We have to do, the kids take, extracurricular activities. And we always say, oh, I don't have time to do it anymore. Try to figure out a way to do it. For every situation in life, there's also always a solution, right? And we just got to figure it out. Sometimes just ask, ask the trainer, hey, can we move our schedule? And usually they'll work with you, right? That's just one example. Number 2, good peer pressure. I know that a lot of times, particularly as parents, you worry about peer pressure, right? Oh, peer pressure. And this is very easy. We all do it, right? We all be around a lot of people that might not do good things, and we end up falling in line, and that's called peer pressure, right? So the one thing I've learned is try to find good peer pressure, right? If you're around people that, like, for example, if you want to be a vegetarian, for example, which is a great goal, right? Be around vegetarians. Just try to find yourself around vegetarians. The good thing about the internets is that you can find communities, right, that are online in your area that have meetups. And you can even find, if you're looking for people of color that are vegetarians, you'll find them online. And you'll be surprised. You'll really be surprised, because it's a lot harder to be a vegetarian when everybody around you eats beef, right? It's a lot harder to be a vegan if everybody around you eats chicken. It's kind of hard. So I say good peer pressure will always work for you, particularly for those people that work out. Try to find yourself some friends that work out with you. That way you can always text each other to check on each other and everything. And I think it's a good idea because, again, good peer pressure is always better than bad peer pressure. Number 3, set realistic goals. Please set realistic goals. I train a lot of people, And a lot of times they'll show up with pictures and they say, I want to look like this by June. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, we can't do that. Like, that's not going to happen. So if you want a washboard abs, you want washboard abs by June and it's January, let me tell you right now, it's not going to happen. And I know you're probably like, oh, Mr. You're discouraging me. No, I'm being realistic. Set realistic goals. Try not to really do this for the looks, right? And here's why I say that. People always say, I want a beach body. You already have a beach body, right? A beach just don't care. A beach is not going to spit you out because you don't have the same body as a model, right? Or as a weightlifter. They're not going to do that, right? So everybody has a beach body, right? It's just what you're comfortable with. So try not to really focus on how you look. Try to focus more on how you feel. That to me is more important than how you look. Because if you feel like $1 million, trust me, you will look like $1 million. I could guarantee that. People will notice that about you. So and again, don't do it for the other gays. Do it for yourself, right? So set realistic goals, right? Really, really set realistic goals that you can keep up with, right? And again, I'm not saying don't shoot for the stars, right? I'm just saying that set realistic goals, because getting washboard abs by June, it's not going to happen. 20-minute abs is not going to give you washboard abs by June. I'm sorry, all right? Just want to let you know that. Number 4, the final one, find something that you love. I'm really big on this. I'm super duper big on this. I should have put this as number 1, because one thing I've learned is that if you don't like doing certain things, like for example, I don't like running, right? I don't like running. I don't like jogging. I don't. The crazy part is I can do it. I can run for miles, but I just don't like doing it. It is boring, right? So, but I do like bike riding, right? So I bike for miles. Like I love bike riding. I can't explain why, but I love it. So I can do it, and what happens is the days where things might not work out, like schedule wise, you still end up doing it because you're always going to do what you love doing, right? You're always going to, if you like eating popcorn, you're going to always figure out a way to do it. So if it's something that you like and really enjoy, you're going to always make it out your way to do it. So if you like dancing salsa, take salsa lessons, go out dancing salsa. Like, yes, that is a workout. Trust me on that. So do those things. So find something that you love and it'll never feel like work. All right. Again, if you have any questions, hit me up at Dan Torres on me on Twitter about your health questions. And we can go on and on. Or if you have any ideas for that. So I hope this wasn't too much for January 2018, but it will work. Peace.
This is a man's world, but it would be nothing without. This is a man's world.
Part 3, UBC, Zip Line McCarthy. Heavy on the list. You blink my ice ring. John Lee Green. Yeah, that's
This is a man's world.
Part 3, UBC, Zip Line McCarthy.
Everybody's favorite segment, how to approach women. I want to say real quick that, and this is a repeat actually, meaning I'm not replaying a segment, but I'm just going over this again because a lot of people always ask me, well, how do I approach women in this manner? How I approach women in this manner? How I approach women over here? There's no set way of doing it. And this is something that I stress to people, right? Because, and it's something that I'm going to talk about consistently. Women are human beings. And how do you talk to a human being is how do you talk to a woman? That's plain and simple, right? And we like to always divide, men and women as like, we consider them like different species, and we're not. We're the same species. Our genitalia is different, right? And that's even up for debate, right? So treat them as human beings, right? So talk to them about regular stuff. Like, and it's funny because we think that we have to have like this gift of gab. You do not, right? That being said, I have to emphasize, and I think this was on episode 3 that we talked about this, right? Becoming a good conversationalist, that takes practice. Learning how to break the ice, right? That takes practice. If you don't practice doing that, you're going to find it difficult when you find someone who's attractive and you want to ask them a question and you don't want to mess it up. Your stress levels are going to go up. So my recommendation has always been to learn how to be a good conversationalist, right? And if you don't really like to do that, learn how to break the ice. Because once you break the ice, everything is cool. So I think that takes practice. And that's something that we should try to practice as much as possible. And I'm going to say this. People probably get mad at me. I'm going to say this. Even if you're an introvert, at least learn how to break the ice, just to open up conversations for even discussions at work. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. But I just feel like women, what's helped me out is that, I treated women like human beings. I mean, duh, anybody wants to get treated like human beings. So if you keep that in mind, it's a regular person. You're talking to a regular person in front of you, no matter how fine she is, or how intelligent she is, right? You should see them as that, right? So with that, I hope that helps out. Thank y'all very much. For this episode, we're going to review The Last Jedi. And I must warn you, for this review of Star Wars The Last Jedi, we are going to have mad spoilers because we feel at this point, over a little bit over a month since it's been released, you should have already seen it. If you ain't seen it, that's on you. But I'm giving you a chance to fast forward to do that. And another thing I'm going to do is, this review is going to be a little bit different for main reason. A lot of people either loved it or hated it. So I really want to discuss that. Instead of doing my usual review, I usually go the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm going to do 2 segments on this one, and both are going to be filled with spoilers. I warn you again. All right, don't come at me talk about, yo, you spoiled it for me. I'm going to do what I enjoyed about it, and then why I believe people disliked it, because there's some people that hated it. So we're going to get into that in a second. Let me just say this. I thoroughly enjoyed The Last Jedi. I really did. I actually liked it way better than The Force Awakens, which I enjoyed as well. But I had a lot of issues with the Force Awakens. But I think The Last Jedi redeemed itself because while I enjoyed Force Awakens, I was kind of like a little bit skeptical of The Last Jedi, especially with the success of Rogue One, which I thought was super amazing. But I enjoyed it. I needed it. I really needed it because 2017 was like really crazy, not just for myself, but I'm sure for everybody else. And this movie gave me a lot of hope. And I just needed to see it. I needed to get injected with this for the new year, right? So I thought that number one was something that I really needed. And I saw a lot of movies this year, and this one was very hopeful. What I enjoyed, number one, is that they answered a lot of questions from from the Force Awakens, right? Like, for example, why did Kylo Ren kill his dad, right? And it wasn't because he was filled with hate. They kind of explained it in this movie. I mean, he is kind of filled with hate. But it wasn't because of that. It's because he realized that he had to let go of his past, right? To really become who he believed he's destined to be, right? And I thought that really explained it. And it's funny because he actually says these words to I can't believe I forgot her name. But he says it to her. He says, hey, like, you got to give all that stuff up. Like, he even says, like, your parents wasn't shit. That's pretty much what he says. And he's like, you gotta forget about that. It doesn't matter though. He's like, all that doesn't matter. Just release that. So I kind of felt like, yeah, a lot of times we gotta do those things to move on to become who we're destined to be. So I felt that even though his intentions might be sinister, he's right. And that's probably why people had issues with it. One of the reasons why. There was a scene where they revealed that Luke Skywalker at one point wanted to kill Kylo Ren because he kind of like foresaw what he would become, right? Which would be somebody who would kill his pupils, right? And let me say this, man. This takes place like 40 years after the events of Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, right? Like this takes place a long time, right? So, when you get older and stuff like that, you really start to have doubts. I can say that. I'm 44, about to be 45. I have doubts. So, of course, you might have flashes of doubts. And remember, Luke foresaw that this kid was going to kill all his students and destroy everything that he's fought and lived for his entire life. So you would think that he would have that moment where he's like, you know what? I got to do what I got to do. And then he changes his mind because he realized that wasn't him. And that's his blood. That's his nephew, right? So, duh. So, but I thought that was interesting because, and Luke had to live with that decision, to the last of his days. Think about that for a second, people. Think about that, right? But But I thought that the final battle between Luke and Kylo Ren was amazing. And it was like a dope plot twist. That last act, and that's the third thing I was in love with The Last Jedi. That last act made up for anything else. You know what I'm saying? Because I had issues with the timeline. You know, when they traveled to that planet, when Finn traveled to that planet, and I just had an issue with that. Like, I had a big issue with that. Another thing that I liked about it is that, so the third act and the final battle between Kylo Ren and Luke really just was like worth the price of admission. It was like the third act was just, it just did it for me. The fourth thing I like is that Finn got a love interest. And shout out to Stephen Barnes. If you don't know who he is, you should read his books. My favorite of his books is Lion's Blood. And he's a dope writer. He's written for TV and stuff like that. Really dope. And he's always talked about, for years and years, he's always talked about how there's very little, when you see these movies or TV series, when it comes to black men, there's very few love interests. You know what I'm saying? So, like, we get Finn, he gets a love interest, you know? And I think that's cool. I mean, don't get me wrong. Do I wish it was a black woman? Yes. Because you don't see, he talks about that too. Stephen Barnes talks about that too. There's not, you rarely see, if you do see a black man in cinema with a love interest, it's usually with a non-black woman. But it's just good to see that. So I kind of felt that. I really did. The fifth thing that I liked about it is that, you know, the supporting cast really played a big role in what was going on to everybody else, right? And I thought that was really dope. I love movies where the supporting cast also plays a role in the main cast, you know, evolution and their character development. Number 5, I love that Poe Dameron got a dress down. Like, he needed that. Like, he needed to be like, yo, look, you on a team, and the actions that you make, you know, are going to affect the team. And I think, let me just say that's probably the 6th thing that I like is that everybody had to step up to the plate. Everybody had to step up to the plate. The 7th thing I like was the fight scene in Snoke's throne room. Like that, that was just so dope. It was just a dope sequence. I would like to see the sequence like all together instead of it being chopped up like it was. So those are the things that I loved about it. I highly recommend going to see it. I might go back and check it out on 3D. DJ Ben Hameen said it's good to see it in 3D, so I'm going to do that. All right. Okay, now we're going to talk about why people probably didn't like The Last Jedi. And let me just say this, that I had some issues with it, but I don't think it was enough for me to give it a bad rating, right? I don't think it was just enough, right? The timeline, you know, Leia's all of a sudden a super Jedi and she floats back miles back to the ship. Like, okay, yeah, true indeed. You know, let you true indeed, right? But a lot of people didn't like it. And I'm going to tell you why. And it's something that like is funny because Hollywood execs throw this at us. They say, you know, they'll tell us like, you know, we hear people say, give us something different and give us something that's not the same formula. And when they do, for several reasons, they don't see the monetary returns that they do when they give us the same thing over and over and over again. So when somebody says you should do something different, they're going to say, we do, but this is what happens, right? And don't get me wrong, there has been some anomalies. There has been situations where they did do something out of the ordinary. And I think the best example I could give of that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Because the Marvel Cinematic Universe took big risks when they did Guardians of the Galaxy, right? That was a huge risk, and they did it, right? Whoever did the studio that did Lord of the Rings, that was a big risk when they did that because at the time, people weren't doing those kind of movies, right? So it really changed the landscape in that. So there's some times when it does happen, right? But a lot of times it doesn't. So when they say, hey, we want to do something different, you know, Hollywood execs will throw that in our face and say, no, you don't. Y'all don't want to see that. Y'all don't want to do that. And we know that there are movies that come out with the same stuff, like the Transformers franchise. Like, it's trash, right? But the numbers don't lie. People come out to see that, right? And I'm not trying to blame the people ultimately, right? Because I really try not to victim blame, right? It's just that there's a lot of arguments that we make, and then the numbers just don't apply to that, right? So I really believe that Disney took a big risk, right? Like, number one, when they killed Han Solo, that was a big risk, right? Because most people, I remember when I was a kid, most people, when they saw Star Wars: A New Hope, they immediately fell in love with Han Solo. That was like immediate. A lot of people were like Han Solo, Han Solo, Han Solo, Han Solo, Han Solo. Even though you had, and I'm not saying that Han Solo was cool. I think Han Solo was very cool, but you had other cool characters in Episode 4, A New Hope, right? So it's kind of crazy. So they took a big risk killing him, and you know they were vilified for that, right? Then they went ahead and killed Luke Skywalker, and a lot of people were livid. But you know, first of all, let me just say this: the name of the title, The Last Jedi, says that he was going to die. That's how I felt. Like when I first saw that title, when they released it, I was like, I knew he was going to die. But let me point out some things, and I'm making a little bit geeky here, right? At the end of Episode 3, Yoda says something after he loses against the Emperor, right? Against, you know, Palpatine, right? He says, it ain't going to be me that's going to beat him. Somebody else got to beat him, and it got to be something else. You know what I'm saying? And the same thing happens in this trilogy, right? Luke Skywalker is like, I'm not going to be the one to beat you. You know what I'm saying? It's not supposed to be me. Because if that was the case, he would have killed them years ago, right? Think about that, right? And you got to put that into perspective, right? So if you're not really paying attention, then you're going to make those kind of arguments, right? But a lot of people hated it because, you know, remember in Episode 7, in The Force Awakens, we learned that the Republic is destroyed, right? So there's no Republic, right? There's just, you know, the rebellion, right? Or whatever you want to call them, right? And then in this episode, a lot of them get destroyed, right? But what they're trying to explain is that, again, like I said in the previous segment, you got to get rid of old shit. We can't go back to dark side, light side. We can't go back. We can't have a Jedi Order and then we have the Sith. It has to be a different way. Why? Because we've been doing this for thousands of years and it ain't been working, right? And if you look at some of the folklore from the Old Republic, right? If you look at that, the galaxy was ripped apart several times because of that beef between the Jedi and the Sith. It just has to be a different way of doing it. But then at the same time, Benicio del Toro's character is saying the same thing. Like, yo, it's two sides of the same coin. You know, like this is what's going on. It's going to always flip-flop back and forth. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that really made the movie so much better. But I can see how people are just not used to that, right? People are just not used to like, well, it's great. People want black and white. They want to know who the bad guy is and they want to know who the good guys are and who's on their team, like who's on what, right? And we're so used to that as an audience that when somebody throws in something different, we're kind of like, whoa, I don't like it. And it's different. That's what it is. It's really different. So I think that's probably why a lot of people didn't like it. They felt uncomfortable about it. It's not something that you can explain. Like you can't really sit there and explain that in 2 minutes. You got to like really get into it. So that's probably why. That could be wrong. You know, let me know what's up. But I think that's probably why people didn't like that. Word. Shout outs for this episode for season 2. Check it out. First of all, I want to shout out my man, Humanity Critic. I've known this brother. I've known him for a minute. And I remember I used to visit his massage. Well, he actually was a masseuse at like a beauty salon. And it was right across the street from Brother George. Rest in peace to Brother George. It was right across the street from there. And I used to always go to Brother George's bookstore, buy a bean pie, a book, and some incense, and then head over there and hang out with him. So we've been homies since then. He's supposed to be doing a podcast. So, shout out to Humanity Critic. Word is born. Also, I want to give a shout out to my girl, Rochelle, who's actually a poet, a writer, an educator. She has her event coming up this Thursday, January 25th. We shall be there here in Dayton, Ohio. So, everybody come through. And then finally, saving the best for last, shout out to Bay, my wife. You can check her out at afromartha.com. She's a textile designer, graphic designer, creative, Niger woman. Shout out to all my Niger folks. Her born day is actually today as I'm recording this. You'll be listening to this the day after. So check her out, afromartha.com. Love you. You mean the world to me. You're an awesome person. Can't do this without you. Yo, let's do this.
Lord of mercy. All night Sunday sun crew. Follow me now. Mercy. All night Sunday sun crew. Follow me now. Mercy. All night Sunday sun crew. Follow me now. Mercy. All night Sunday sun crew. Follow me now.
Yow. Another episode, again, technically episode 22. We did it. We into season 2. of Where My Killer Tape At. I love y'all. Thank y'all for all the love. Please come back, subscribe. We are on iTunes, SoundCloud, and we are on Google Play. Please show me some love in the reviews. Subscribe to us. Let your mama know, your auntie know, let your uncle know. Let your math grade teacher know, your fifth grade math teacher know that I'm up here with my Killer Tape At. You could, if you're going to talk about me on Twitter or on Instagram, please use the hashtag Where My Killer Tape At, spell killer Killa. Do that for me if you're going to talk about anything. If you're going to come at me, check me out on the Twitters at Dantresomi, DANTRESOMI, or at Omi's Podcast, OM as in Mary, IS Podcast. Word is born. I love y'all. I see y'all. Happy New Year. Let's do this for 2018. Take over the world.